Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. And today we're going to continue with the Nag Hammadi Bible study series, or Gnostic Scriptures. And we're going to begin with going over the book entitled The Prayer of Thanksgiving. And then after that, we're going to go over the second Discourse of Great Seth, which is another book. But first I'll begin by, and I'm going to get into Seth. I'm going to talk a lot about Seth today. And also Yaldabaoth, the ruler of the Archons, who could be another name for Jehova. We'll get into that. But I'm also going to start by talking about Hermes. And it basically, this stuff all goes back to Egypt. And I'll explain that a little bit as we talk about the papyrus Mammut and Asclepius, one of the disciples of Hermes Trismegistus. So Hermes Trismegistus was the Egyptian thrice great Thoth, who was an initiate of Mercury and the teacher of Egyptian culture. Hermes pointed the way to the spiritual sun, or Christ. So, Hermes is also Thoth in the Egyptian teachings. And this is according to Rudolf Steiner, what I just explained there a moment ago. Now, the book, The Prayer of Thanksgiving, comes from the Codex number 6 of the Nag Hammadi library. It is the conclusion of the Greek magical texts called Papyrus Mammut, as well as Asclepius, which is a Latin version of the perfect discourse of Hermes Trismegistus. In Asclepius, the prayer is flanked by 2 rubrics containing instructions for the use of the prayer. The instructions are to pray to the west at sunset and to the east at sunrise. In other words, always pray towards the sun, which is interesting because I was just thinking about this recently during prayer and meditation. Normally, people who pray in a certain direction, they pray to the east. So, for example, the Eastern churches like the Orthodox Church, Judaism, and also Western Muslims, Muslims here in the West, they all pray to the East. And based on my studies, rather than restricting prayer or meditation to a certain one certain fixed direction, I personally, based on my studies, I personally have been feeling more comfortable praying or meditating facing the sun, whichever direction it happens to be in. So this really resonates with me personally, based on my studies. And I wanted to read the prayer of Thanksgiving directly from the book. If you have the book, if you have this version, it's on page 422. So this is the version of the Nag Hammadi Scriptures that I'm reading. Harper 1, Harper Collins Publishers. And very thick. Take me a minute to find this location here in the book. And so the prayer of thanksgiving reads as follows. And before, what this was part of was it was part of a Hermetic initiation, where it would include the prayer of thanksgiving, and also it would include a ritual kiss, and also a sacred meal as well. That would be part of this Hermetic initiation. They would have a sacred meal after. And so it reads, "We thank you. Every soul and heart reaches out to you. O name free of trouble, honored with the designation God, praised with the designation Father. To all and all things come fatherly kindness and affection and love. And if there is sweet and simple instruction, it grants us mind, word, and knowledge. Mind, that we may understand you. Word, that we may interpret you. Knowledge, that we may know you. We are happy, enlightened by your knowledge. We are happy. You have taught us about yourself. We are happy. While we were in the body, you have made us divine through your knowledge. The thanksgiving of one approaching you is this alone, that we know you. We have known you, light of mind. Life of life, we have known you. Womb of every creature, we have known you. Womb pregnant with the Father's nature, we have known you. Eternal constancy of the Father who conceives. So have we worshipped your goodness. One favor we ask. We wish to be sustained in knowledge. One protection we desire, that we not stumble in this life. And it says, when they prayed and said these things, they embraced and went to eat their sacred, bloodless food. And in the footnotes, bloodless, I guess the original translation may be vegetarian. So it says they embraced and went to eat their vegetarian food. So I wanted to read that. That was pretty interesting. And it also indicates that they were vegetarian. The Hermetic, the disciples of Hermes. Now, before I forget, I meant to switch so this is the sun seal, and of course the day of the week for the sun seal is Sunday, which is, I've been doing my videos on Sundays, but today is not Sunday. So I'm going to switch the sun seal with the Mercury seal. And by the way, the sun seal is white because the color for Sunday it's supposed to be white or gold. And then here's the seal for Mercury. And today is Wednesday, and the color is yellow. So just bear with me while I set up the Mercury seal, and then we'll continue. So next we're going to get into this book entitled The Second Discourse of Great Seth. That's the book there. And we're going to talk about a lot about Seth. I'm going to explain a little bit from the Rosicrucian teachings before we get into the book. So, of course, Abel was killed by Cain, and then Seth was sort of the makeup child. So Abel and Seth represent the spiritual element, and they were initiators. Everybody from this line, from the Abel-Seth line, are known as initiators, and descendants of Abel and Seth include Abraham, Solomon, and Jesus. And these people were initiators. Then Cain represents the physical element, and these people were not initiators, they were initiates. So they would receive initiation. And then once they received it, if they were, high enough up, they could then initiate other people. And they were the craftsmen and the laborers. For example, who built the first temple of Solomon? Descendants of Cain include Hiram Abiff. And Hiram Abiff reincarnated as Lazarus, also known as John the Evangelist, and also as Christian Rosicrucian. And Christian Rosicrucian was, or Rosicrucian was the founder of the Rosicrucian order. So that's pretty interesting. It tells us that the Rosicrucians come from the Cain line. So you might have noticed in previous videos I have been going over a lot of Sethian books that are in the Nag Hammadi Scriptures. So before we go over another one entitled The Second Discourse of Great Seth, I want to preface by talking for a minute or two about Seth related to the Rosicrucian teachings. For anyone new just joining us, Rudolf Steiner was and remains the foremost Rosicrucian teacher in history. That's why I include his name on the whiteboard in the upper right-hand corner. Because what I'm doing is, as I go over the Nag Hammadi Scriptures, I'm giving a lot of information and details from the Rosicrucian teachings and the work of Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner has hundreds of Rosicrucian books. My personal collection of Rudolf Steiner books continues to grow. I'm going to show you some of the books in a little while towards the end as I make a statement about whether or not I'm going to continue these videos. There's a question. We'll see. Probably will, going on a little longer. But beware of false Rosicrucian organizations. So I'll talk a little about what Steiner taught about Seth. And I'll talk about the Golden Legend. The legend of the Holy Cross, or the legend of the Wood Cross, is other names that it goes by. And there was a painting depicting that by Piero della Francesca. Rudolf Steiner explained the meaning behind the legend of the Wood or Holy Cross, also known as the Golden Legend, and Seth, son of Adam. So Seth was able to wander towards paradise and allowed to pass the cherub guardian and its spinning sword. So paradise was protected by this guardian cherub with its spinning sword. And so, before I forget to mention it, it was the Archangel Michael who assisted Seth and helped him to make it past this guardian cherub. Michael probably said something to the cherub, and then the cherub let him go by. So the tree of knowledge and the tree of life had grown together, and Seth took a seed from it and placed it into the mouth of his father, Adam, when he died. From that seed grew a tree. The wood of the tree was used for Moses' staff, and then also for the construction of Solomon's temple. And then after that, it was used for a bridge over the pool in Bethesda, which Christ crossed. Christ crossed that bridge. And finally, the wood was used to create the cross used for the crucifixion. So Seth entering paradise, what that actually means, according to Rudolf Steiner and the Rosicrucian teachings, it means that Seth was an initiate and was able to penetrate the secrets unknown by others. The two trees represent the blood tree in man. The main artery branches out, blue blood and red blood, and the alchemy of man's nature. Now the tree Seth grew out of Adam sprouted 3 shoots. These 3 shoots symbolize the 3 principles and eternal powers of nature. Atma, I'll write them down here. Oh, my black is dying on me. So Atma, Buddhi, which is Buddhi, and Manas. Manas. And I'll get rid of this, and I'll use a different marker. So Atma, Buddhi, and Manas are the 3 principles and eternal powers of nature, which have grown together to form a trinity. And before I forget, you can learn about some of these things in other traditions, like, for example, in the Eastern traditions, like in Buddhism or Hinduism and stuff like that. They'll use some of these terms. So again, we're now in the second discourse of Great Seth. That's the name of the book we're going over. We're going to go over this book for the remainder of this video. And this first section that we're going to go over is right here. The call for the salvation of divine thoughts. I'll go over that first. I'm actually going to read from the book, directly from the book. And what I'll do is I'll read the first chapter where it starts talking about the water as we get ready to read another section related to Christ entering Jesus at baptism. So for anyone that has this book, I'll tell you what page I'm reading on. I'm just going to read from the first chapter, which is on page 478. Just give me a minute, because this book is around 800 or 900 pages. So, let me switch my bookmark. Okay. And let's call together an assembly. Let's examine this creation of his and send someone, just as he also examined thoughts in the regions below. I said this to all the members of the whole vast assembly of the Majesty, so that they rejoiced, and the entire household of the Father of truth rejoiced. Since I am of them, I reminded them of the thoughts that had come from the undefiled Spirit and had descended to the water, that is, to the regions below. A single thought was in all of them, since it came from a single source. They expressed their decision to me, and I concurred and went forth to reveal glory to my kin, my friends in spirit. And we're going to go over the next section entitled Coming into This World. And that in coming into this world, Christ describes entering into Jesus at baptism and how the archons were angry about Christ incarnating. Of course, the archons are the spirits of darkness, and they are the authorities of earth right now. The archons are what are known as retarded archai. The archons are very negative and adversarial towards humanity, but the archai really are not. The archai are known as the primordial angels, and they are above the archangels, who are above the angels in the spiritual hierarchy. So I'm going to read this section entitled Coming into This World now, directly from the book. It's on page 478, where we just were, same page, and it reads as follows. I approached a bodily dwelling and evicted the previous occupant, and I went in. The whole multitude of archons was upset, and all the material stuff of the rulers and the powers born of earth began to tremble at the sight of the figure with a composite image. I was in it, and I did not look like the previous occupant. He was a worldly person, but I am from above the heavens. I did not defy them, and I became an anointed one. But neither did I reveal myself to them in the love coming from me. Rather, I revealed that I am a stranger to the regions below. So that's the section entitled Coming to This World. Remember that in the four canonical Gospels of the Bible, the state authorities and Jewish religious authorities wanted to kill Jesus. The state authorities wanted to kill the baby Jesus, whose family was guided by the archangel Gabriel to flee to Egypt. Then later, Jesus was crucified by the state authorities at the demand of the Jewish religious authorities. Next, we'll go over this section entitled unrest and confusion in this world. So let me read that now directly from the book. It's on pages 478 and 479. And it reads as follows. There was a great disturbance with confusion and restlessness in the whole world and in the council of the archons. Some were convinced when they saw the mighty deeds I accomplished. They are the generation of Adonios, and are descended from the one who fled from the throne to Sophia of hope, since she had previously given indication about us and all those with me. They all were moving about. Others hurried to inflict every sort of punishment on me from the world ruler and his accomplices. They were restless of mind about what they would plot against me. They thought their majesty was everything, and they also told lies about the human being and all the majesty of the assembly. They were incapable of knowing the Father of truth, the human being of majesty. They usurped the name through corruption and ignorance, through a flame of fire and a vessel created for the destruction of Adam, made to conceal all those who likewise are theirs. The rulers from the realm of Yaldabaoth disclosed the circuit of the angels. This is what humanity was seeking, that they might not know the true human, for Adam, the modeled creature, appeared to them. So throughout their dwelling place, there was agitation and fear that the angels surrounding them might take a stand against them. For those offering praise I died, though not really, that their archangel might be useless. So that's the section there. And according to Rudolf Steiner, humanity did not originate from two humans named Adam and Eve, as Genesis suggests. This is also reflected in science if you study population genetics and the studies related to the Y chromosome, Adam, and the mitochondrial Eve. According to Rudolf Steiner, Adam and Eve represent the group spirit and the group soul of early humanity. So next we're going to go over this chapter, this next chapter entitled The Arrogance of the World Ruler. The next section entitled The Arrogance of the World Ruler. So I'll write that down now. Okay. What I'll do is I'm going to read the first chapter from The Arrogance of the World Ruler, which is on page 479. And it reads as follows. Then the voice of the world ruler announced to the angels, I am God, and there is no other beside me. I laughed heartily when I reflected upon how conceited he was. He kept saying over and over, Who is the human being? The whole host of angels who had seen Adam and his dwelling place laughed at its insignificance. Thus their thought turned away from the heavenly majesty, who is the true human, whose name they perceived in the insignificance of a dwelling place. They are inferior, senseless in their empty thought, in their laughter, and so they were corrupted. And when it mentions the whole host of his angels who had seen Adam laughed, who is it talking about, do you think? It's talking about the archons following Yaldabaoth. It refers to them as angels, but we know from the Rosicrucian teachings that the archons are actually retarded archai. The archai are known as the primordial angels. So it's not talking about benevolent angels like Jesus's Christ has its own host of angels. It's not talking about them. It's talking about the archons. And then let me read it again, bearing that in mind, and it should make more sense. I'll read it again real quick. That only took a moment to read. But bear that in mind, and that should make more sense, I think. So then the voice of the world ruler announced to the angels, I am God, and there is no other beside me. I laughed heartily when I reflected upon how conceited he was. He kept saying over and over, who is the human being? The whole host of angels who had seen Adam and his dwelling place laughed at its insignificance. Of course, the world ruler is referring to Yaldabaoth, and we're going to be talking a lot about Yaldabaoth as we move forward in this video. I'm going to reveal something from this book, the second Discourse of Great Seth, that may shock some of you if you're not familiar with the Gnostic Scriptures. Next, we're going to go over this section entitled In the Mouth of Lions, where Christ is going to describe entering, what it was like entering Jesus and the way he was treated by people on the earth. Of course, I want to talk about Jesus, the crucified man, is not the same as the Christ Spirit. There's a difference. It's very important to know that. So, let me start off by reading the section directly from the book on page 480. And it reads as follows. I was in the mouth of lions. They hatched a plot against me to counter the destruction of their error and foolishness, but I did not give in to them as they had planned. I was not hurt at all. Though they punished me, I did not die in actuality, but only in appearance, that I might not be put to shame by them, as if they are part of me. I freed myself of shame, and I did not become faint-hearted because of what they did to me. I would have become bound by fear, but I suffered only in their eyes and their thought, that nothing may ever be claimed about them. The death they think I suffered, they suffered in their error and blindness. They nailed their man to their death, Their thoughts did not perceive me, since they were deaf and blind. By doing these things, they pronounced judgment against themselves. As for me, they saw me and punished me, but someone else, their father, drank the gall and the vinegar. It was not I. They were striking me with a scourge, but someone else, Simon, bore the cross on his shoulder. Someone else wore the crown of thorns. And I was on high, poking fun at all the excesses of the rulers and the fruit of their error and conceit. I was laughing at their ignorance. Very, very interesting and powerful section there. So, this is very interesting in my opinion. And you have to distinguish the difference between Jesus the Jew, who was a physical human, um, and the person who was crucified on the cross, and the Christ Spirit. There's a difference. They're not the same. So Jesus the human was nothing without the Christ Spirit. The Christ Spirit is the teacher, the healer, the Son of God. The Christ Spirit entered Jesus during the baptism. This section suggests that the Christ left Jesus, the human Jesus, or the man, before the crucifixion. And furthermore, it suggests that another spirit or being suffered, like, for example, an archon. And so, considering what I just explained, I'm going to read it one more time. On page 480, in the mouth of lions. I was in the mouth of lions. They hatched a plot against me to counter the destruction of their error and foolishness, but I did not give in to them as they had planned. I was not hurt at all. Though they punished me, I did not die in actuality, but only in appearance, that I might not be put to shame by them, as if they are part of me. I freed myself of shame. I did not become faint-hearted because of what they did to me. I would have become bound by fear, but I suffered only in their eyes and their thought, that nothing may ever be claimed about them. The death they think I suffered, they suffered in their error and blindness. They nailed their man to their death. Their thoughts did not perceive me, since they were deaf and blind. By doing these things, they pronounced judgment against themselves. As for me, they saw me and punished me, but someone else, their father, drank the gall and the vinegar. It was not I. They were striking me with a scourge, but someone else, Simon, bore the cross on his shoulder. Someone else wore the crown of thorns. And I was on high, poking fun at all the excesses of the rulers and the fruit of their error and conceit. I was laughing at their ignorance. Pretty interesting. I really liked that. I wanted to share that with you guys, with everybody. And yeah, that's interesting when you consider that the Christ Spirit left, and wasn't actually in that body as it was being, or those bodies as they were being punished and tortured. The next section we're going to go over is entitled "The Crucifixion Interpreted," and I'm going to highlight this verse where it reads, "He ripped the temple veil, an earthquake shook earth, the souls of the dead were released." And I'm going to talk about that and explain that a little bit. I'm also going to make some references to the Holy Bible, the four canonical Gospels, and got a lot to go over in this video. It's probably going to be a little bit longer than some of the other ones. So let me just keep moving forward so we're not here all day long. And so we're going to go to page 481, which is where we already were. We'll stay on this page. And I'll read the Crucifixion Interpreted. It reads as follows. The world was not receptive to my visible exaltation, my third immersion in an image that was perceptible. The flame of the seven authorities was extinguished. The sun of the powers of the rulers set. Darkness overcame them, and the world became impoverished. They bound this one with many bonds and nailed him to the cross, and they secured him with 4 bronze nails. He ripped the temple veil with his own hands. An earthquake shook earth's chaos, for the souls of the dead were released and resurrected, and they walked out in the open. They laid aside ignorant jealousy and lack of insight by the dead tombs, and they put on the new person. They had come to know the blessed, perfect one of the eternal, incomprehensible Father and the infinite light. That's what I am. When I came to my own and united them with me, there was no need for many words. Our thought was one with their thought, so they understood what I was saying. We made plans for the destruction of the rulers, and in this I did the will of the Father. That's what I am. So, and this section is really great because it exposes more false church dogma. The things that most of the Western churches are still waiting for already happened, but the Zionist Antichrist dogma doesn't acknowledge what the Holy Bible says in the 4 Gospels, where it talks about the sun becoming dark for hours during the crucifixion. And that's obviously not some typical eclipse. Eclipses are for a few minutes, but in the Gospels, during the crucifixion, it says that the sun became dark for hours. And it also says that the veil was rent or torn. Angels were descending and ascending. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit and explain it a little bit. So the veil was actually created by the archons to separate the physical world from the spiritual world. The bridge between humanity and God had been blocked using what they call the veil. The Jewish religious authorities were not serving, obeying, or honoring God. So Christ came to repair the bridge to God. And the Jewish religious authorities rejected Christ, if you read the 4 Gospels. There will be no zombie apocalypse with physical bodies digging their way out of the ground. That's nonsense, and it's not supported by the 4 Gospels. Physical bodies will not rise. And so we just read it, and it said that souls of the dead were released, not the physical bodies, but the souls. Wars and rumors of wars already happened. If you study history, Titus and the Roman army encircled Jerusalem. They attack and destroy the second temple of Solomon. And Actually, I was going to put that on the board. Let me put that on the board. So this is what I wanted to put on the board just to emphasize it. I'm going to make a reference to Matthew 24, verse 34. But wars and rumors of wars already happened. A lot of the churches say they're still waiting for it, but they don't know what they're talking about. They're not acknowledging what Jesus said in the 4 canonical Gospels, and they're not acknowledging history. If you study history, Titus and the Roman army encircled Jerusalem, which, by the way, that's exactly the way that it's described in the Bible, but they say they're still waiting for it. But that's exactly what Titus did. He encircled Jerusalem, and then they attacked and destroyed the Second Temple of Solomon. So the wars and rumors of wars that Jesus talked about related to what people think of as the end times already happened. That's why in the Bible, when you read the Gospels, Jesus said, all these things will happen before this generation that I'm talking to passes away. Go back and read Matthew chapter 24, verse 34. The wars and rumors of wars, and by the way, that Matthew chapter 24, verse 34, that's only one spot that it's in. It's in other spots as well in the Gospels. That's just one example. But the wars and rumors of wars related to Jerusalem, as I just mentioned, already happened. So when you think of the calendar, right, we think of our calendar and we think of AD, right? We think of AD, after death. That's not quite correct. It's a little bit deceptive. AD didn't begin at Jesus' death. AD began at Jesus' birth. So according to our calendar, Jesus was crucified in the year 33 AD. Titus Flavius attacked Jerusalem 37 years later, which is around the year 70. The Roman army encircled Jerusalem first. Then they attacked Jerusalem and destroyed the Second Temple of Solomon. Remember, the first Temple of Solomon was destroyed by the Babylonians as punishment by God because of the Israelites. They continued to disrespect and disobey God, and they were basically, because of their wicked and evil actions, God punishes them and allows the first Temple of Solomon to be destroyed by the Babylonians. And not only that, but he allows the Babylonians to take the Israelites captive, kind of like as slaves. So false church dogma is exposed by both history as well as the Gospels. Now, for anyone that's just joining, I went over the 4 Gospels in the Bible in a previous series. It's probably my longest series. Well, it's one of the longest ones, but I really break it down. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend it. So we're going to go over this next section entitled Opposed and Persecuted in the World. And I'll talk about Satan, also known as Ahriman, and we'll compare that being to Yaldabaoth. Before I forget, though, you may hear me talking about, in this series, I've been talking about the authorities and how the authorities on earth serve the archons. The archons are the rulers of this world. Now, not everybody in a position, that doesn't apply to every single person in a position of authority. Basically, if you're in a position of authority, you can either serve the people and thereby serve Christ, or, because remember that, as an example, Christ washed the disciples' feet as an example of love. So you can either serve the people, and if you're not serving the people, you're serving the archons, the dark forces. So what I'm going to do is, in my teachings, I say that people who say they're Christians, who only know the false teachings, the false church dogma, aren't following the true Christ because they don't know the true Christ. So what Christ are they following is the question. If they aren't following the true Christ, they're following what I call the Antichrist and the archons. In Christianity, they say Satan. In the Rosicrucian teachings, Satan is called Ahriman. And in the Gnostic scriptures, like the books I'm presenting here, the archons are the spirits of darkness and the rulers of this world. And Yaldabaoth is their leader. So when I use the term Antichrist, I'm referring to the being who opposes the true Christ. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to read directly from the book, pages 481 and 482, just briefly. Entitled, Opposed and Persecuted in the World. It reads as follows. When we left our home and came down to this world and became embodied in the world, we were hated and persecuted both by those who are ignorant and by those who claim to be enriched with the name of Christ, though they are vain and ignorant. Like irrational animals, they do not know who they are. They hate and persecute those whom I have liberated. If these people would only shut their mouths for once, they would start weeping and groaning in futility because they have not really known me. Rather, they have served two masters and even more. You, however, will be winners in everything. In combat, fights, in scheme, with jealousy and anger, and schism with jealousy and anger. In the uprightness of your love, we are innocent, pure, and good, and we have the mind of the Father in an ineffable mystery. So, the next section we'll go over is entitled, The Opponents Are Insignificant and Ignorant, and I'm going to talk more about the crucified Jesus versus the living Christ. And it's talking about the opponents of the true Christ who worship the dead Jesus rather than the living Christ. The section reads as follows. It was a joke, I tell you. It was a joke. The rulers do not know that all this is an ineffable unity and undefiled truth like what is among the children of light. They have imitated it, and they proclaim the doctrine of a dead man along with the false teachings that mock the freedom and purity of the perfect assembly. So just to explain this a little bit, it's talking about the Western churches who believe in the dead crucified Jesus rather than the true living Christ. And these atheists only believe in what they can see and touch physically, like the doubting Thomas in the Gospels. So in their ignorance, they're waiting for Jesus to return physically, to ascend from heaven physically, but they have been waiting for a very long time for that, and it's not going to happen. And every so often, they always say, "Oh, it's going to happen now." Like the year 2000, I think the year 2012. There's always certain years where they say, "This is it. It's going to happen," but it's they've been waiting for a couple thousand years, and it's not going to happen. The false church dogma of the Western churches is a mockery of the true living Christ. The perfect assembly doesn't refer to any Western church, but rather the perfect assembly is Christ, the host of angels, and the children of light. So that just kind of explains a little bit more, or a little bit better, what I just read from the section entitled "The Opponents Are Insignificant and Ignorant." And it's talking about these opponents of the true living Christ. And reading out loud or speaking can really make you parched. And so I'm going to continue to read from the section as follows. In their doctrine, they bind themselves to fear and slavery and worldly concerns and improper forms of worship, for they are ignorant and of no significance. They do not accept the nobility of truth. And so that's exactly what I was saying about people who follow false church dogma and believe in false church dogma. They do not accept the nobility of truth. And I just read a quote, in their doctrine, they bind themselves to fear and slavery and worldly concerns, unquote. So what does that mean? Most Western Christians falsely believe they follow Christ, which will prevent them from being punished in hell. But they worship the crucified man, not the living Christ. So they have no true knowledge of the Spirit and are slaves of material existence. They have worldly concerns rather than spiritual concerns. They are slaves of Yaldabaoth and the archons, Ahriman or Satan. So we're going to go over this next section entitled The Perfect People Who Live in Harmony and Friendship. And I highlighted the verse that says, quote, love naturally and not only of necessity, completely and not merely in part. So, in the Gospels, Christ tells his disciples to love others as they love themselves, and he washes their feet as an example. But most of the churches in the West are different. They don't follow Christ's teaching. They follow the words and gossip of other people. They heard this and that about a person, so they are unwelcoming and unloving towards the person. Many people who go to church put the advice of other people first, and they set Christ aside like an object on a shelf. So I'm going to read this section from page 483. I'll read it directly from the book. The perfect people who live in harmony and friendship. Be wise among yourselves, not only in words that are heard, but also in deeds, in words that are fulfilled. In this way, those who are perfect are worthy to be established and united with me, and they will have no enmity. With good friendship, I do everything through the one who is good, for this is the unity of truth, that people should have no adversary. If some cause division, they do not learn wisdom, because they cause division and are not friends. They are enemies. But those who live in the harmony of friendship, of love, of brother and sister, naturally, and not only of necessity, completely, and not merely in part, those truly reflect the will of the Father. This is universal and perfect love. Christ is talking about loving all people, not picking and choosing. That's why Christ said, quote, love naturally and not only of necessity, completely and not merely in part. How often are people who call themselves Christian unloving and unwelcoming based on the unfounded opinion of someone else? How often are people who think of themselves as Christian unwelcoming and unloving based on demonic influence? I think it happens a lot, sadly. Next, we're going to go over this section entitled Adam and His Descendants Were a Joke. And it almost sounds like, reads like, an Italian guy talking, hey, this guy's a joke. This guy's a joke. You'll see as I'm reading it what I mean. But now remember that according to the secret book of John, Adam was not the first human. And we went over that, I believe, in my very first video of this series. And I've been talking about that a little bit. And of course, we also learned that Adam was, I believe, androgynous, right? So, Adam was a joke. He was, I'm going to read it now, and it reads as follows. Adam was a joke. He was created by the ruler of the seventh realm in a phony way, in the shape of a human, as though he had become stronger than I. Now remember, this is Christ speaking, or Christ is teaching here. And we know from the secret book of John that Adam was created by the archons. The leader of the archons is Yaldabaoth. Now, Yaldabaoth is a demonic being related to Satan and Samael in the Gnostic and Kabbalistic writings. We went over the secret book of John in my first video, as I mentioned a moment ago, of this series. According to the secret book of John, Adam was not the first human. Barbello was the first human, as the first image of the Spirit created by the Father of all, the One. In Genesis, it says, let us make man in our image. Us and our, of course, is plural, referring to the Elohim. And the archons were servants of the Elohim. We're going to talk more about the Elohim in a few minutes and about Jehova related to Yaldabaoth. I can joke around a little bit about how Italian people talk. I'm part Italian, I'm part Slavic, and also part Native American Indian. So I'll continue the reading as follows. Abraham was a joke, as were Isaac and Jacob, since they were called patriarchs in a phony way by the ruler of the seventh realm, as though he had become stronger than I. So what Christ is explaining here is that they were not patriarchs. They were just people who were misled by Yaldabaoth. And I'm talking about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Were not patriarchs. They were just people who were misled by Yaldabaoth. The true patriarchs are the Father of all, Barbello, and Christ. So you can see the roots of Zionism go way back to the work of Yaldabaoth. And we're going to talk more about Yaldabaoth as I'm getting ready to finish this up. There's only a few minutes left, but pretty much the last few minutes we're going to be talking about Yaldabaoth and also Jehova. So I'm going to continue to read as follows. David was a joke, since his son was named Son of Humanity and was put in power by the ruler of the seventh realm, as though he had become stronger than I. And this makes sense, it makes sense. And remember that the ruler of the seventh realm is Yaldabaoth. It says here, Solomon was a joke. I'm going to continue to read now as follows. Solomon was a joke, since he became arrogant through the ruler of the seventh realm and thought he was anointed. And anointed is used here for the word Christ. Of course, in the Bible, Solomon turned from his God and practiced idolatry and blamed it on his many wives. So I'm going to continue reading as follows. The 12 prophets were a joke since they appeared as imitations of the true prophets. And so Christ is saying the 12 prophets of the Old Testament weren't the true prophets. And what I'm going to do is start another section. I'll put it on the board. Next, we're going to talk about this section entitled "The Ruler of the World is a Joke." And so, according to these Gnostic scriptures, this is really a bomb here, folks. You may not know this, but Yaldabaoth is actually Jehova in the Old Testament. And these particular scriptures or verses in the Old Testament, Isaiah chapter 42, verse 6, chapter 45, verses 5 through 6, and also verse 21 in chapter 45, chapter 46, verse 9, and Exodus 20, verse 5, they all really make Jehovah look like not really a good God, but a weak God. And I'll explain that. We're going to talk about that. So I'm going to read the section first. The section reads as follows. The ruler was a joke, for he said, I am God, and no one is greater than I. I alone am Father and Lord, and there is no other beside me. I am a jealous God, and I bring the sins of the fathers upon the children for 3 and 4 generations. And those lines that I just read, they come from the Old Testament verses that I just noted on the whiteboard. And, you know, what kind of God would punish the children of somebody for 3 and 4 generations? That's like you know, a person does something wrong or sins, and then their child is punished for it, and then that person's child is punished for it. That person's child is punished for it, all the way down to 3 or 4 generations. Doesn't really make sense for that to be a good God. So this is a pretty powerful argument, and so this is a profound revelation by Christ here in the book of the second discourse of great Seth in the Nag Hammadi Scriptures. And Jehova is not the father of all, according to these Gnostic scriptures. Jehova is Yaldabaoth, claiming to be the father of all. Very, very interesting. It really rearranges the puzzle pieces so that they fit together. And this is really getting long, so I need to finish it up. But it goes on to say that Christ is within people, and it mentions a lot of good things about Jesus the Christ and how everything is united by the love of Jesus. Again, this refers to Jesus the Christ, not Jesus the man who was crucified and died on the cross. And the way to awaken the Christ within is through love towards others, as I was talking about before. Now, before I forget, before we finish this up, I want to talk for a moment about Jehova according to the Rosicrucian teachings, because Rudolf Steiner does not present Jehova the way that these Gnostic scriptures present Yaldabaoth. In the Rosicrucian teachings, Rudolf Steiner presents Jehova as really kind of hard to understand maybe an enigma, I don't know what word to use, but really a mystery God or a mystery being. And Rudolf Steiner says that Jehovah is overseeing the evolution of humanity from the moon, which is very strange. I'll explain that. So it's odd that Jehovah would even be on the moon because the Elohim are associated with the sun, right? And but here's Jehovah on the moon, and Rudolf Steiner teaches that the lunar forces, the moon forces, are death forces. They're forces associated with death. The solar forces, the sun forces, are associated with life. And I just find it very strange that Jehovah would be on the moon overseeing the evolution of humanity. And look at how bad humanity is doing. It's doing pretty bad. But the strange thing is Rudolf Steiner, as far as I've studied, doesn't really present Jehovah as being a being that is overseeing the enslavement of humanity. So Yaldabaoth is clearly described as this being that is trying to enslave humanity, prevent humanity from developing or reaching the spiritual world, and really keep them bound to the earth, which is exactly the way Satan is described. And so, but there. So the question is Yaldabaoth posing as Jehovah, or are they similar beings or the same being? And it seems like Yaldabaoth could be the same being as Jehovah, because Jehovah, it doesn't seem to really add up that Jehovah has humanity's best interest in mind. It's also odd that Jehovah would be on the moon, which is completely associated with death, forces related to death. And I just wanted to talk about that for a moment to clarify. Not all the Rosicrucian teachings by Rudolf Steiner line up perfectly with the Gnostic teachings. A lot of it's the same or similar, and they just use different terms. But as far as I'm aware, Steiner doesn't present Jehovah as a negative being the way that the Gnostic scriptures do. So, in my personal opinion, Jehovah is very suspect being on the moon. That's very odd. But why would Jehovah not be on the sun? And if Jehovah has our best interest in heart, why is it like we're being controlled by a negative being like Yaldabaoth? Now, a quick explanation of why Steiner may not be teaching the Gnostic, some of the stuff, some of these deeper. First of all, we're in very deep water now, folks. This is very deep stuff. We're talking about very advanced spiritual teachings. And Rudolf Steiner said that not all the Rosicrucian teachings can be made public. So there's certain things that he kept back that he didn't make public. And it could be that some of these Gnostic teachings get into the stuff that Rudolf Steiner didn't want to make public. That's a very, very strong possibility. That's the way it looks to me, in my opinion. It looks like I may now be talking about some of the things that Rudolf Steiner didn't want to make public. And so, for example, he may not have wanted to. What I'm talking about here, as far as Yaldabaoth and Jehovah being the same being, that may be part of the higher secret Rosicrucian teachings that were not allowed to be made public. I just wanted to throw that out there as a possible explanation. Now, I mentioned that we're in some of the deeper waters here, and I'm not an expert swimmer. I'm just a student. I've learned some of the advanced swimming techniques. I can navigate through these deeper waters, but I'm really not an expert swimmer, which is to say I'm really not a teacher. I'm a student. So with that said, we went over, I'll show you some of the books that I have by Rudolf Steiner. I'm getting ready to explain briefly that this may be my last video. It's probably not going to be, but it might be. If you want to see more videos like this, you have to click like. Please click like. It doesn't matter if I have 300 views or 500 views if there's only 10 people that clicked like. What's going to happen is that the video is not going to get promoted, and it's really not going to go anywhere unless people start clicking like. So if you want to see more content like this, please click like. It's very important. We went over this book already in a previous series. So if you haven't seen my series entitled An Outline of Esoteric Science, these are all Rosicrucian books and series that I already did. We also did a series going over knowledge of the higher worlds and its attainment. Hopefully you can see that. I'm not good at putting stuff in front of the camera. I apologize if you can't see that very well. But we went over that. I did a series going over that. Now, this book here, Knowledge of the Higher Worlds and Its Attainment, with just under 100 pages, is supposed to be basically another version of this book, How to Know Higher Worlds. And now I just got this. I'm going to read this and compare it to that and see if they're the same, or I think there's a little bit different. This has a lot more pages. This has 250 something pages if you include the index. So this is a book I'm getting ready to study. This is a book that I'm in the middle of reading. I've been reading it for a while. It's pretty deep. This gets into advanced mathematics and geometry, the fourth dimension. This book is really good because it has a lot of, I don't think I'm going to be able to really show you on the camera, but it has a lot of pictures and diagrams and stuff. I've never seen a Rudolf Steiner book with a lot of pictures and diagrams and stuff. You can see all kind. It's just full of pictures and diagrams, geometric shapes, and it's a really good book. Very complicated. That's one that I've been reading for a while. I'm still working on that one. Here's another book I got that I'm going to be reading. This is Turning Points in Spiritual History. You can take a look at that. So I'm studying this one. I haven't read this yet. It gets into Zarathustra, Hermes, Moses, Elijah, Buddha, and Christ. Now, I have not read this yet, but I don't believe that this is going to say that all those beings had Christ in them. They were not, that Zarathustra was not the same as Christ. Hermes was not the same as Christ. Moses, Elijah, Buddha, they were beings related to Christ that helped serve Christ, but they were not Christ. I believe first time Christ incarnated was in Jesus, but I'll be learning about that as I read this. Here's another book. This is another one that I have that I still need to read. It's called The East in the Light of the West, and this also gets into Buddhism and Buddha. So I'm looking forward to reading that. And I don't make these videos for me. I make it for you. I'm just happy I can be fine just doing my studies on my own and reading on my own and learning on my own. I don't need to make videos. Again, if you want to see more of this stuff, please, it's important that you click like. Otherwise, this could be possibly my last video. And not just for the reason that people don't click like. Certainly not just for that reason, but I just have a lot of stuff that I'm doing. I got a lot of things I'm working on.